Catherine Alexander, the teacher and host of my new course, Healing Ourselves. Over the last 35 years, I've taken on many clients on a dietary healing journey and seen many remarkable recoveries. The tutorial that follows is one of the topics of great interest that we cover. So if you're interested in the limitations of the paleo or keto approach and why carbohydrates are so important for healing, then sit back and enjoy. Life depends on oxygen and glucose. Without oxygen and glucose, the brain will shut down and we die. We cannot make glucose. We have to get it from the diet. The body monitors this very tightly, as any deficit is life-threatening. We get our glucose from dietary carbohydrates. When digested, it releases molecules of glucose. Complex carbohydrates break down very slowly and deliver a steady stream of glucose. The brain and nervous system take priority as glucose is the fuel they rely on. The muscles will also take up glucose for energy and they can store it. When we build muscle, we build its carbohydrate store. The liver can also take up glucose, use it for energy, store it as glycogen, or convert it to fat. Our fat cells can also take up glucose, and they too can either use this for energy or convert to fat. As glucose levels fall in between meals, so too do our insulin levels. When insulin falls, this signals the liver to release its stored glucose to tide us over to the next meal. Be in no doubt about what the body monitors. If there is low glucose in the system, the body will respond. It only monitors glucose availability. It doesn't matter if you have other fuels such as fats or protein, these will not register. So if your diet is not supplying glucose, then the adrenal glands, which lie on top of the kidneys, will release adrenaline and cortisol. These stimulate the liver and the muscles to release their stored glucose to supply the brain and the nerves. In addition, cortisol makes our muscles and other tissues that are more reliant on insulin less responsive to insulin. Cortisol induces insulin resistance, which is the body's way of preserving what little sugar there is for our central nervous system. You can appreciate that long-term stress would also be a risk factor for insulin resistance. Under normal conditions, when the cell is responsive to insulin, then insulin will attach to a receptor on the cell membrane. This triggers activity, and the glucose transporter 4, or GLUT4, receptor relocates from inside the cell to the cell wall. This is the glucose doorway. When the cell takes up glucose, it can either be stored as glycogen, which happens in the liver and the muscles, or it can be used for energy, or it can be converted to fat, which happens in the liver and fat cells. When cells are not responsive to insulin, then the glucose transporter does not relocate. And it's not just glucose that can't get in, but also protein and potassium. Therefore, insulin resistance means that cells cannot make efficient energy or regenerate. They can't heal. If the cell has to rely on fatty acids for energy, this creates a lot of oxidative stress and it perpetuates a state of insulin resistance. The story doesn't end here. What happens when our glucose reserves are so depleted and we've used all our stored glucose? This happens when we skip meals, especially breakfast, or go on low-carb diets, or when we can't meet our energy requirements through too much exercise or too much stress. Again, cortisol comes to the rescue. It stimulates the muscles to break their own protein down and release their own amino acids into the circulation. These are taken up by the liver. Cortisol stimulates the liver to convert these amino acids to glucose. About 58% of our amino acids can be converted to glucose, but it's a very lengthy and expensive process, generating a lot of acidic waste that takes around 7 days for the kidneys to clear. The brain requires about 500 glucose calories a day in order to function. The liver is capable of producing 1,600 glucose calories a day, which would be just enough to keep a sedentary person going. So think about this. If you believe that you don't need your carbs and you can exist on protein and fat, then you are quite right. The adrenals will just keep pumping out the cortisol to break down body protein. Over a period of time, it leads to tissue wasting. Prolonged cortisol production causes insulin resistance. Under these conditions, it is impossible for the body to regenerate and heal. To heal, our cells must receive nutrients and generate sufficient energy capacity. Dietary healing is about restoring just that. If you're interested in healing and want to create your own dietary healing program, then please join me for this 5-week online attendance course where you will learn what to do and why. You can download the course details from the website along with the next course dates and costs. I look forward to teaching you all.